approach and docking of Dragon to the International Space Station. Overall, this will be Dragon's 49th visit to the space station and its 19th human spaceflight to the orbiting laboratory, including the Demo 2 flight test, 10 NASA Commercial Crew Program rotation flights, and 4 Axiom Space private astronaut missions. And this is SpaceX's 5th Dragon mission just this year.
Now, as we continue to get those great views of Dragon making their approach to the International Space Station, let's look back over what their journey has been like these last 16-plus hours for them, as launch day preparations started early this morning for our crew members. About 4 hours prior to launch, the crew completed their final medical checks before joining the SpaceX team to get into their spacesuits. And there you can see that those preparations well underway, and after suit-up, NASA operations, and checkout in the building, the crew walked out, waving some final farewells to their family and friends waiting outside. The next destination for the crew was then the launch pad, and that's where they would board their Teslas and take a short ride to Launch Complex 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where the Falcon 9 and the Dragon spacecraft were awaiting them. 2.5 hours prior to launch, the crew ingressed or entered the Dragon spacecraft, walking over that crew access arm and enjoying some of those last views of the Space Coast, heading into the White Room and eventually into the spacecraft itself.
And at 8:43 a.m. Pacific time, or 11:43 a.m. Eastern, the 9 Merlin 1D engines ignited and Falcon 9 lifted off from Launch Complex 40, beginning Crew-11's journey to the International Space Station. Following stage separation, the first stage booster supporting the mission performed a boost-back burn to bring itself back to the launch site, where it landed at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station on Landing Zone 1. Then a couple minutes after that, we had a good orbital insertion of Dragon, followed by a few minutes later by spacecraft separation. We are currently waiting for the approach initiation burn coming up as our next milestone, but there have been a few burns already that have brought Crew-11 to where they are currently at in their journey.
And with that, too, catching up to where they are, the Dragon spacecraft a little under 12 kilometers away, closing in at a rate closure about 4.4 meters per second, and that brings us to the journey they had to take to get there. And as we approach the approach initiation burn, and that first burn would occur about 30 minutes after liftoff earlier this morning, in which Dragon would execute the first major burn known as the phase burn, which is performed at the first apogee, or the highest point of the initial orbit, and that raises Dragon's perigee, or the lowest point, to a higher altitude. This was the first of 5 major burns using its Draco thrusters required to raise Dragon's orbit and position it for approach to the International Space Station.
Then earlier today, that sequence of rendezvous and phasing burns continued as Dragon executed the boost burn, and that was at 12:27 p.m. Pacific time, or 3:27 p.m. Eastern. The boost burn put the crew in an orbit where Dragon's apogee, or the highest point of the orbit, was 10 kilometers lower than the station. But raising only the apogee of Dragon's orbit isn't enough for a rendezvous where we want to dock. Before we can approach the station, we need Dragon's entire orbit, not just the highest point, to be effectively shadowing the space station. Now, to do this, Dragon executed the close burn at 1:11 p.m. Pacific time, 4:11 p.m. Eastern time, which was just about a half orbit after its boost burn.
And then the close burn would place Dragon on an orbit roughly co-elliptic with the International Space Station, meaning it was maintaining an orbit roughly 10 kilometers lower than the station the entire way around the Earth. And again, that's in contrast to only being 10 kilometers lower than the station during Dragon's apogee, or the highest point of its orbit, which is achieved by the boost burn beforehand. After that, Dragon performed a mid-course out-of-plane burn to continue to fine-tune its trajectory and align its orbital track to match that of the International Space Station. And that boost burn would take place, or out-of-plane burn, at 2:03 p.m. Pacific, 5:03 p.m. Eastern Time. And then less than an hour later, at 6:13 p.m. Pacific, a lot happening in a short amount of time, the 4th major burn would occur, known as the transfer burn. And this is where Dragon raised its apogee, or highest point of its orbit, to just 2.5 kilometers lower than the International Space Station.
Yeah, and I love this graphic following along with each one of those burns so you can understand what's happening with Dragon. Dragon then finally rounded out everything with a final co-elliptic burn at 6:59 p.m. Pacific, 9:59 p.m. Eastern Time, to once again maintain a constant orbit lower than the station, this time just 2.5 kilometers below the station. Now, this was a shorter burn lasting just over 30 seconds.
Now, as we we approach the approach phase and the approach initiation burn, which is about a little bit more than 10 minutes away at this point, we enter the approach phase where SpaceX flight controllers will work with tandem with the team at NASA and in Houston to maneuver Dragon to the proper attitude. They will initialize the navigation sensors used for the methodical approach to the station. They'll also activate and test out a number of systems on Dragon, including the bidirectional communications with the station using what's called the C2V2 system. Now, that stands for the Common Communications for Visiting Vehicles. You can see where the acronym comes from right there. It sets up a data stream from Dragon to the station, giving another path for Dragon's telemetry to come to the ground and giving an additional command capability to astronauts aboard the orbiting laboratory.
Now, that's what Crew-11 has been experiencing so far on their journey to the International Space Station. But looking ahead, at approximately 9:49 p.m. Pacific time, Dragon's Draco thrusters will fire for the approach initiation burn. This will take place when Dragon is about 2.5 kilometers below station and about 7 kilometers behind it. The approach initiation burn will bring Dragon about 400 meters or a quarter of a mile directly below the station. Now, a small approach initiation mid-course burn is planned for about 25 minutes later. These maneuvers will also move Dragon inside one of 2 checkpoints around the station that requires a set of go-no-go pulls with the different control teams. Now, the first checkpoint is called the approach ellipsoid, or as you may hear us call, the AE. The approach ellipsoid is an imaginary shape measuring 4 by 2 by 2 kilometers, and it's essentially a large 3-dimensional oval. Now, before controllers give Dragon permission to move inside the approach ellipsoid, the spacecraft will be on what is known as a 24-hour safe trajectory. This means that if Dragon lost all control to its thrusters...
SpaceX, Dragon on Dragon to ground. Comm check from seat 3.
Mike, I have you loud and clear on Dragon to ground. How me?
We have you loud and clear, and seats 3 and 4 are suited. The other 2 are momentarily.
Copy all.
Comms from the core to Crew-11 as they're donning their suits. Now, before the controllers give Dragon permission to move inside that approach ellipsoid, the spacecraft will be on what is known as a 24-hour safe trajectory. This means that if Dragon were to lose all control to its thrusters, it would be at least 24 hours before its trajectory would move inside of that approach ellipsoid.
And once Dragon arrives at the 400-meter mark below the station, it will be known as what is Waypoint 0, and that will be the first checkpoint during their approach to the International Space Station. The vehicle can hold here at the 400-meter mark, but if all of its systems check out, and we'll hear calls about it a little bit later on, Dragon can continue its approach to Waypoint 1. Dragon's move from Waypoint 0 to Waypoint 1 will swing it up and over top of the station as they'll be docking to the zenith port of the Harmony module today of the International Space Station, and it'll be arriving at a distance of approximately 220 meters. At this point, it will be on what we call the docking axis, which is essentially meaning it's directly in front of the space-facing docking port, and again, on the International Space Station's Harmony module. Just before arriving at Waypoint 0, the NASA and SpaceX teams will conduct a go, no-go poll for Dragon to move inside the now keep-out sphere, another checkpoint that consists of an imaginary sphere around the station with a radius of 200 meters. Flight controllers use this to monitor all arriving and departing vehicles, and this is another chance to confirm all of the guidance, navigation, and control systems are working correctly on Dragon before moving even closer to the station. It carries a similar requirement on this orbital trajectory that if Dragon were to somehow lose control of its thrusters, and the space station would be safe for 4 orbits or about 6 hours rather than the 24 hours required to enter the approach ellipsoid.
Then once Dragon has approval to move inside the keep-out sphere, it will move from Waypoint 1 in toward Waypoint 2, which is just 20 meters away from the station. Once Dragon is only 20 meters away at Waypoint 2, the spacecraft focuses on aligning its docking system with the International Docking Adapter, or the IDA. We may also hear the call-out CHOP, which stands for Crew Hands-Off Point. Now, this happens a little less than 30 seconds before docking when Dragon is just a few meters from the docking port. And then at that point, any aborts will have to be done automatically by Dragon. And the grand arrival when our crew arrives at the space station, Dragon will fly in and make contact with the IDA, giving us what we call a soft capture. The soft capture ring then retracts until sensors indicate it's time for 12 hooks to drive in place to give us a hard capture and then firmly secure Dragon to its new home on the space station.
Now, once the hard capture is confirmed, the station crew aboard the International Space Station, namely NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers, will manually start to begin the docking procedures and manually pressurize the vestibule, or the area between the Dragon hatch and the International Space Station hatch. Meanwhile, umbilicals that provide power, audio, and data connections from the station to Dragon are then put in place. And then it's time for leak checks and hatch opening, which are currently timelined to come a little more than 2 hours following the docking. So right now we're continuing to track along, and we heard comms earlier between the ground and the crew. They're getting suited up to provide that extra layer of protection for them and pressurize those suits as we're entering another round of dynamic ops. It's been a busy day for Crew-11 after launch earlier this morning. So that approach initiation burn coming up in about 8 minutes or so. So we'll see and hear more communications as those crew members continue to get dressed up.
Yeah, Crew-11 is currently coasting. They've got a couple more hours on their flight from launch this morning. And we did attempt a launch yesterday morning, but due to weather, had to move the launch this morning. But they're still docking around a similar time, which is great for them. They have a little bit of a shorter trip. Or I guess they could have had a longer trip on Dragon, which may have been a pro for them either way.
And if they did launch yesterday, it would have been about a 39-hour phasing period
Right.
versus the 16 hours that you mentioned there. But even then, I feel like they might be a little anxious and excited to get there because even at this moment, with the approach initiation burn and the anticipated docking time, which right now tracking around the 2:26 a.m. Eastern time, approximately 11:26 p.m. Pacific, that's still about 30-ish minutes, half an hour or so early. So you know that these Crew-11 members with Commander Zena Cardman, Pilot Mike Fink, both of NASA, and then you also have Kimi Yue of JAXA and Oleg Platonov of Roscosmos, again, getting suited up, getting ready for that approach initiation burn. But you heard it in their comms after the launch today in those special words, a lot of emotion, a lot of excitement, I'd imagine, knowing that, you know, at the end of a trip, when you're hitting your destination, that excitement continues to ramp up.
Yeah, and I'm sure Zena is very excited. She's been ready since last year, so I'm really excited to see her finally flying her mission. And there you can see the map, and you can see the destination for Crew-11. That's the International Space Station. That is where Crew-11 is heading to.
And right now, the International Space Station making its way across the Pacific Ocean, and it's heading towards a southern southeast trajectory. So it's going to start to clip that southern portion of South America there. But yeah, as they continue that slow and methodical approach, they're approaching about 9 kilometers away from the International Space Station and closing in at a rate about 4.3 meters per second. So they're still moving along. And again, we're continuing to track that approach initiation burn, which we're going to be about 4 to 5 minutes away from that moment. But once they reach the International Space Station, they will become members of Expedition 73. And that already has 7 members on board. And taking a look at who's going to await them, we mentioned NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers. She's going to be a part of the hatch opening procedures that'll happen a little bit later on here today and tonight, or I guess tonight and this morning, depending on what coast you're on. But also NASA astronaut Johnny Kim. He's in the cupola, the window to the world, and he's using special technology to help monitor Dragon's progress as they continue to inch closer and closer to the International Space Station.
Yeah, I'm sure both crews are very excited to meet each other. They are going to have a handoff period. This is very typical with NASA crew rotations, where we have about a week of time, depending on the mission and what needs to be handed off to each other. But this gives them that full handoff with each other before Crew 10 returns back home.
And right now they're targeting for Crew 10 with that handover period of about 3 full days, and that'll be a familiarization of the International Space Station for 2 first-time flyers in Zena Cardman and Oleg Platonov, Cardman of NASA and Platonov of Roscosmos. They certainly want to make sure that they get their bearings, they know where they are, how to operate everything that they need to, but also the handover of research, technology demonstrations, everything that Crew 10 and Soyuz MS-29 have been working on, and then able to hand that off from Expedition 73. And then, of course, Johnny Kim, NASA astronaut, will depart with his Soyuz crewmates a little bit later on in the fall, and that's when Expedition 73 will turn into Expedition 74. But as you mentioned, right now they're targeting no earlier than the 26th of August for that handover period. Certainly a lot has to play in favor. The weather has to cooperate as well. A West Coast splashdown anticipated. It'll be the first NASA crew that'll return to the West Coast. So a lot to look forward to. But again, right now, Crew-11, they're just anxious to get back into their suits for that extra level of protection again as we continue to track AI burn, which is approaching about 3 to 4 minutes away from now. And we'll be sure to walk you through that. But for this crew and knowing what they've gone through and how flexible they have been, whether it's through weather yesterday or everything that's had to happen in their careers, it's been a flexible group, but a very grateful group. And I know that that is going to be a mentality that's going to carry not only through docking today, but throughout the course of their mission.
Yeah, and Joseph, you mentioned that they are getting suited up in their suits. They do have to put on their suits when they're going through some dynamic events, including docking to the International Space Station. These suits just help keep them safe, keep them cool, in the unlikely event of a depressurization inside of the cabin during the docking operations. So they'll put their suits on, they'll get strapped in with their harnesses into their seats, and then once they're all ready to go, they can begin the process to dock to the International Space Station.
And we'll continue to hear those comms called out from the core here in SpaceX and Hawthorne and their headquarters up to the crew. Of course, they'll do similar checks, leak checks, pressurization checks that we heard at launch time. They'll initiate all those procedures as they get ready for that approach initiation burn, again, coming up here in the next couple of minutes. But you mentioned the suits themselves. One thing that we talked about during the launch earlier this morning was that one of the astronauts, Colonel Mike Fink of NASA, is wearing one of the new IVA suits. Now, when you look at the crew all lined up, the 4 of them across, you can't really tell the differences. Everything seems, at least visually, the exact same, but I'm sure it'll be exciting for Fink to don that suit again, and I'd be curious to get his reaction knowing what his other crewmates are wearing as well.
Yeah, that's what I love about SpaceX is that the crew really helps create the suits here, and you can see this animation on the screen. Now, the IVA suits have a 3D printed helmet. They're still very similar to each other, but there's been some upgrades. They do have a little bit more mobility on the new IVA suits. They've taken a lot from the extravehicular suits and have a little bit more mobility there. One of the top updates for this suit is that the suit is a 2-piece suit. So you can see at the waist where it looks like there's almost a seam there. On the new suit, that's where the zipper is, where they can separate the top part of the suit from the bottom part of the suit. Makes it a little bit easier to get into the suit. Now, the old IVA suit is 1 piece. They do have 1 zipper where they're going through and putting on the whole suit. So the new updates, again, feedback from the astronauts, the crew that has been flying with SpaceX, has been able to give this feedback and allow us to make these updates that make it a lot easier and make a lot of improvements that are coming from the people that are using the suits.
So as we get updates in the crew in their suits now, we just got note that the approach initiation burn is underway, and that's one of the big key milestones now for the Dragon spacecraft to continue its methodical approach to the International Space Station. So certainly some good news there is everything continuing to move forward as Dragon continues that stair step to catch up to the orbiting laboratory.
As we continue in towards docking, let's take a closer look at the Dragon spacecraft that is bringing Crew-11 to the International Space Station today. The Dragon spacecraft and its trunk stands over 27 feet tall. There are 2 windows on the spacecraft. The nose cone opens shortly after launch to expose the forward bulkhead thrusters and docking mechanism that will connect with the International Space Station to the IDA. Dragon's trunk holds solar cells, which power Dragon while it's in free flight, and the trunk can also carry unpressurized cargo, so there's a lot of space on the spacecraft.
And Dragon has 16 Draco thrusters that can be used in space to help navigate the spacecraft to its destination, each providing 90 pounds of force. Now, that doesn't include the 8 Super Draco thrusters used for an abort, which are no longer active once the crew is in orbit.
Yeah, Dragon has played a significant role in advancing our future in space by safely transporting crew to and from the space station. And there are currently 5 Dragon spacecraft supporting human spaceflight missions that have docked to the International Space Station already. Endeavor, Resilience, Endurance, Freedom, and Grace, which you could see there on your screen. Today's crew is flying aboard Dragon Endeavor. This is the first operational Dragon to carry crew on board during SpaceX and NASA's Demo 2 mission in 2020. Endeavour has been very busy since then, having also flown NASA's Crew-2, Crew-6, and Crew-8 missions, as well as the Axiom-1 mission. And in fact, this is the first Dragon spacecraft to fly for a sixth time.
And with that, it's the sixth time they have completed the approach initiation burn, which just got wrapped up just a few moments ago. And now Dragon tracking to be a little bit more than 7 kilometers away from the International Space Station and moving about 4.8 meters per second. So it was a good burn and everything moving quite along and swimmingly for the NASA SpaceX Crew-11 team. Now, overall, this is Dragon's 49th visit to the space station and its 19th human spaceflight mission to the orbiting laboratory. Including Crew-11 on board right now, SpaceX has now flown 74 crew members to the space station since the Demo 2 mission in May of 2020. And actually hearing from the SpaceX team earlier today that this is actually the anniversary of the splashdown of Demo 2 and the return of astronauts from American soil. So Endeavour, which was that spacecraft for Bob and Doug, now docking the International Space Station on that 5-year anniversary. And for nearly 25 years, crew aboard the space station have completed thousands of scientific and educational experiments, and Crew-11 is prepared to add to that growing number. Crew-11 will conduct hundreds of science and experience and technology demonstrations during their mission, in which they will spend multiple months working aboard the orbital laboratory. Having more crew members on board significantly expands the amount of research that can be conducted, and this crew will conduct their new scientific research to prepare for human exploration beyond low Earth orbit and benefit humanity on Earth. And some of those will be directly intertwined with the Artemis campaign that'll send astronauts back to the moon and beyond, so it'll be fun to see what they're able to participate in during their long-duration stay.
Yeah, always very exciting to see what these crews can do. Some of the more than 200 research and tech demonstrations Crew-11 will participate in include a set to study plant cell division and microgravity's effects on bacteria-killing viruses, as well as perform experiments to produce a higher volume of human stem cells and generate on-demand nutrients. Overall, the hundreds of research and tech demonstrations the crew will work with throughout their mission span a wide range of disciplines, from life and physical sciences to advanced materials, technology development, in-space production applications, and even some student-led research. And not only will all this research provide valuable insights for future deep space missions of exploration and help establish a market in low Earth orbit, it will also directly benefit humanity here on Earth. When astronauts engage with students worldwide via the ISS ham radio program, researchers will use the ham radio hardware to test software for Navigation and Communication Test Bed, or NAVCOM, that could help shape future lunar navigation, which is a personal favorite of Mike Fink.
And that was something that he talked about a lot during the media breakout sessions that we had with him. Is for him, during his last mission, which was 14 years ago, it was an opportunity to communicate with not only people in North America and in the United States, but he had a chance to communicate with people all across the world and took a lot of pride in that he got to speak with everyone on each and every individual continent. So I know that's probably an experiment and technology that he's really excited to dive back in. Expedition 73 is also scheduled to conduct a Bionutrients 3 investigation, and that's producing essential nutrients on demand in space using engineering microbes like yogurt and yeast and helping offset nutrient loss during long-duration missions. The study also tests food safety, including pasteurization, while exploring sustainable techniques for deep space travel. And that really ties into the Artemis campaign. As we do missions further and further out, you're going to need to have those opportunities to preserve your food and be able to produce food when you're a little further away from home. Now, there are currently 7 astronauts and cosmonauts living aboard the International Space Station as a part of Expedition 73. As we continue to follow along and track the path of Crew-11 here this evening. Following Crew-11's arrival today, the space station will have a total of 11 crew members, fitting Crew-11, 11 crew members aboard for just a few days. Part of those 11 crew members include the Crew-10 cadre of NASA astronauts, including Anne McClain. Nicole Ayers, who we mentioned earlier, will be part of the hatch opening procedures. JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov.
Yeah, the Crew-10 astronauts will bring the new arrivals up to speed on everything happening aboard the space station, from emergency procedures to ongoing research. When NASA and SpaceX teams determine weather is ideal for splashdown, the members of Crew-10 will board their Dragon named Endurance and return back down to Earth.
Now, direct handovers between crew allow for the continuity of these activities and help to ensure a continuous U.S. presence on the International Space Station, and that's been that for nearly a quarter of a decade. And celebrating the 25th anniversary of continuous human presence in November, I know that was something that program manager for the International Space Station, Dana Weigel, incredibly proud of, talked about it after the post-launch today and in a lot of the media breakout sessions, and a lot to look forward to. This will be the crew on board when that anniversary comes around. And in the fall, NASA astronaut Chris Williams and Roscosmos cosmonaut Sergei Kudzverchkov, as well as Sergei Mikhaev, will join the crew on orbit. And shortly after that, we'll have the departure of the Soyuz MS-27, and that's what we were talking about earlier with NASA astronaut Johnny Kim coming home, and that will mark the commencement of Expedition 74. Now, as we continue to follow along with Dragon's procedures to the International Space Station, now 5.6 kilometers away and closing in at a rate about 4.6 meters per second. While we wait for our next milestone, let's take a moment to meet our crew. NASA astronaut Zena Cardman is your Crew-11 commander. Selected as a NASA astronaut in 2017, Crew-11 is her first space flight. The Williamsburg, Virginia native holds a bachelor's degree in biology and a master's degree in marine sciences from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. At the time of her astronaut selection, she was pursuing a doctorate in geosciences, and Cardman's geobiology and geochemical cycling research focused on subsurface environments from caves to deep sea sediments. Since completing initial training, Cardman has supported the real-time station operations and lunar surface exploration planning. So she's used to working and studying in environments that are harsh and isolating.
Now, the pilot for Crew-11 is NASA astronaut Mike Fink. This is Fink's fourth trip to the space station, having logged 382 days in space and 9 spacewalks during Expedition 9 in 2004, Expedition 18 in 2008, and STS-134 in 2011, the final flight of the Space Shuttle Endeavour. Throughout the past decade, Fink has applied his expertise to NASA's Commercial Crew program, advancing the development and testing of Dragon and Boeing's Starliner spacecraft towards operational certification. The Emsworth, Pennsylvania native is a graduate of the United States Air Force Test Pilot School and holds a bachelor's degree from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Cambridge, in both aeronautics and astronautics, as well as Earth, atmospheric, and planetary sciences. He also has a master's degree in aeronautics and astronautics from Stanford University in California. Fink is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel with more than 2,000 flight hours in over 30 different aircraft.
And it is a special trip, this Crew-11 for Mike Fink, just because of what he's been able to accomplish with Space Shuttle Endeavour, the final mission there,
right,
and then moving on over to Dragon Endeavour for today's flight. Well, now moving on to Kimi Yui with 142 days in space. This mission is his second trip to the International Space Station after his selection as a JAXA astronaut, in 2009. Yui flew as a flight engineer for Expedition 44 and then Expedition 45 and became the first Japanese astronaut to capture JAXA's H-2 transfer vehicle using the station's robotic arm. In addition to constructing a new experimental environment aboard Kibo, the Japanese experiment module, he conducted a total of 21 experiments for JAXA. In November 2016, Yui was assigned as the chief of the JAXA astronaut group.
And last but not least is mission specialist and Roscosmonaut Oleg Platonov. This mission is his first spaceflight. Before his selection as a cosmonaut in 2018, Platonov earned a degree in engineering from Krasnodar Air Force Academy in aircraft operations and air traffic management. Assigned to test cosmonaut in 2021, he has experience in piloting aircraft, zero-gravity training, scuba diving, and wilderness survival.
So now we continue to follow along with the path of Crew-11 as they recently completed the approach initiation burn, and everything went swimmingly for that burn. Everything nominal. The crew suited and seated, ready to continue their process. Now the next milestone is going to be waypoint 0, which we still have a little ways away. The crew about 4.7 kilometers away. Waypoint 0, that's the 400-meter mark for Dragon. So still some time, but anticipation continuing to build up as, again, the crew both aboard Dragon Endeavour and aboard the International Space Station, anxious to have hugs and handshakes here in the next little while.
Yeah, we showed that graphic earlier with all those very close maneuvers as the Dragon spacecraft approaches the International Space Station. Every single one of these maneuvers is very slight and steady. But what I think is really cool is like we're getting 400 meters away from the space station, but they're both moving at about 17,500 miles per hour. But speed is relative, so when you see them next to each other, it doesn't look that fast. They are flying very quickly.
And I've heard a lot of astronauts in this process, they say slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So as methodical as it can be for the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft to make and inch its way, what we see on the screen, you're absolutely right. And to see them moving as quickly as they do, a lot can happen in a short amount of time. Well, we know that everybody is suited and seated, and again, we're continuing to track along as the Dragon spacecraft now 4.4 kilometers away from the International Space Station and continuing to close in on a range of about 4.2 meters per second. Well, they're continuing to track each other. Last time we checked in with where the International Space Station was, it was crossing over the Pacific Ocean, heading towards the east coast of the more southern region of South America. So as they continue that cat and mouse game of trying to find each other along the way, let's take a look at that crew that you have here on the ground supporting today's mission. Now, that's a great live shot of where we are here in Hawthorne, California, and that's where all the positions actively monitoring all the systems on the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft. And we also have all the teams that are in NASA's Johnson Space Center doing likewise from the International Space Station perspective. And Jesse, that's where we're going to pretty soon hear a lot of communications on what they call the big loop, where we're going to get both vehicles, International Space Station and the Dragon spacecraft, along with the teams here in Hawthorne and the teams here in Houston, all synced up on a single line of communication so that everyone has open dialogue and open communication as we get further and further in the docking process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's multiple teams that are going to be monitoring the crew throughout their journey. We have the launch team this morning. We have this crew in mission control right now, Hawthorne, monitoring the crew all the way as it gets to the International Space Station. And then we'll transfer over to Houston, monitoring the crew while they're on the station. So there is that overlap period where both teams need to be working in tandem with each other. And we're about to experience that very shortly.
And we're continuing to track for an approximately a contact of about 11:26 p.m. Pacific time. And that's what we're tracking right now. And that would be about 2:26 a.m. Eastern for that initial soft capture between the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft and the International.
SpaceX copies on the big loop, 4.010 complete.
And that's great communication there between, again, the teams here on the ground and the crew up aboard. It's been a little bit quiet, but we know it's going to pick up as they get closer and closer. And again, we talked about the big loop that we're going to be here monitoring. And again, the teams in Houston keeping a close eye on that as well. But again, we were tracking right now at approximately 11:26 p.m. Pacific time, at 2:26 a.m. Eastern time for that soft capture and initial contact between Dragon Endeavour and the International Space Station. Approach initiation burn came and went well. Now we're looking to approach waypoint 0, that 400-meter mark. And again, Dragon now inside 4 kilometers away. Now 3.8 is what we're tracking, and starting to slow down a little bit, about 3.9 meters per second rate of closure. So they're getting closer and closer, Jesse.
Yeah, it's going to be a slow and steady approach, as always, but there's going to be a lot of events happening. We're going to hear a lot of comms, as Joseph mentioned. We're going to hear the call-outs as they get from waypoint 0 to waypoint 1, waypoint 2, and then all the activity as the spacecraft approaches the International Space Station.
So as we mentioned, that there's a lot of teams involved, including NASA's Johnson Space Center and the International Space Station Flight Control Room. And that's where I'd like to welcome another member of our broadcast team here today, and a good colleague of mine, Sandra Jones. Sandra, how are things looking in Houston?
Hey, good morning, and welcome to the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. We are gearing up for this morning's docking and looking
Dragon
forward
SpaceX on the big loop. You are go to begin suit leak check procedure 4.011 when ready.
Activating 4.011. We are go.
And those communications just now between the ground and up to the commander of Dragon, that is Zena Cardman. They are going to begin working through some suit leak checks at this point, as they are now suited up in their spacesuits. But again, we are looking forward to welcoming Crew-11 on board the space station soon. Dragon's approach will be monitored both on the ground and from the space station's cupola, using special software to track Dragon's approach and make sure it stays in the expected zones. Once Dragon is docked, NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers will be primed to start hatch opening operations, and they will start by opening the large hatch on Node 2 Zenith, or the space-facing port, which will give them access into the pressurized mating adapter. The crew will then pressurize the vestibule, which is a small space between the hatches on the Dragon and space station. This area was previously exposed to vacuum prior to docking, so the crew will need to fill it with air and make sure its pressure is nearly equal with the atmospheric pressure on Dragon and the space station. Airs will then use a small valve on the station's hatch to slowly introduce air into the space station's vestibule. Flight controllers here in Houston will monitor and verify the pressure readings to make sure that everything is leak-free before we get ready to open up the hatches. NASA Flight Director Ronak Davey is the Mission Control Director for today's approach and docking, and to their right is their CAPCOM or capsule communicator who will be communicating with the crew aboard the space station. There are currently 7 astronauts aboard the International Space Station, and as we've discussed, that number will jump up to 11 once Crew-11 astronauts arrive on board. And as we continue to hear those communications as the crew is going to begin working through their leak checks, we're excited to get our Crew-11 astronauts aboard to work on handover.
SpaceX on the big loop, you are go to initiate suit leak check.
So with that, the International Space Station team is ready for docking this morning. That's the latest from here in Mission Control Houston. I'm going to toss it back over to Hawthorne to continue to walk you through the next steps this morning ahead of docking.
Thanks, Sandra. Now coming up, once Dragon arrives at 400 meters below station, it will be at what is known as waypoint 0. That will be the first checkpoint during our approach, and you can kind of see these movements here on your screen on the graphic. The vehicle can hold here at 400 meters, but if all systems check out, Dragon can just continue its approach to waypoint 1.
Dragon's move from waypoint 0 to waypoint 1 will swing it up and over top of the International Space Station, arriving at a distance approximately 220 meters. At this point, it will be what is called the docking axis, which is essentially means directly in front of the docking port. The crew are headed to the zenith port of the International Space Station, or the space-facing port, the Node 2 of the International Space Station. Dragon has docked to Node 2, also known as Harmony, for all of those crewed missions so far, because that's where both the international docking adapters are located.
And once Dragon is only 20 meters away at waypoint 2, the spacecraft focuses on aligning its docking system with the International Docking Adapter. And again, we may hear a call out called CHOP, which stands for Crew Hands Off Point. This is a little less than 30 seconds before docking, and this means that at this point, any aborts will have to be done automatically by Dragon, hence the hands off.
And the grand arrival, when our crew arrives at the International Space Station, Dragon will fly in and make contact with the IDA, or the International Docking Adapter, giving us what we call a soft capture. That soft capture ring then retracts until the sensors indicate it's time for the 12 hooks to drive in place to give us a hard capture and firmly secure Dragon into its new home on the International Space Station. The crew, namely NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers, who you heard from Sandra just a moment ago, will begin to manually pressurize the vestibule and the area between the Dragon hatch and the station hatch. Meanwhile, umbilicals that provide the power, audio, and data connections from the station to Dragon are put in place. Then it's time for leak checks and the hatch opening, which is currently timelined to come more than 2 hours or so following the docking.
Yes, but I'm sure Crew-11 is getting excited as they know that they're actually hovering around the International Space Station. We just have some maneuvers that we need to do still to make sure that they can align with the docking adapter and dock safely today.
And right now, Dragon currently 2.5 kilometers away from the International
Dragon, SpaceX on the big loop, we see 4 good suit leak checks.
Dragon copies on the big loop, we see the same.
And the big loop communications continuing as the crew in their suits and doing those those suit checks again. Time for the leak checks and hatch openings, which we'll see a little bit later on, but all part of those safety procedures put in place for not only for the spacecraft, but eventually onto docking and before we can open up the hatch and have those handshakes and hugs. Now, we mentioned earlier that this is the same Crew-11 team that's going to be on board the International Space Station for its 25th anniversary of continuous human presence, and they're going to join what's already 7 crew members on board the International Space Station of Expedition 73, including Crew-10 and Soyuz MS-27. Now, the members of Crew-10, they launched back in March 12th, in fact, of 2025, and they have been up there for a little while, led by NASA astronaut and commander of the crew, Anne McClain, first-time flyer, and NASA for the pilot of Crew-10, Nicole Ayers, Takuya Onishi of JAXA, and Kirill Peskov of Roscosmos. And also Johnny Kim, the NASA astronaut, a part of the Soyuz MS-27 crew that launched back in early April with Sergei Ryzhikov and Alexei Zubritsky. So for Zina Cardman, Mike Fink, Kimi Yui, and Oleg Platonov, excited for that reunion. And in fact, Zina Cardman, NASA classmates, a part of the Turtles class with Johnny Kim. So I know they're excited to catch up with each other as well. Kimi Yui onboarded and became an astronaut along with Takuya Onishi. And for Yui, that's his best friend. He's actually looking forward to going and reuniting with his best friend. And it's been a little while, about 4 years since the last time there were 2 JAXA astronauts on the International Space Station together. So impressive there. And then for Oleg Platonov, reuniting with his Roscosmos cosmonaut crew as well. So a lot of reuniting, a lot of happiness that'll be coming from this crew, but to be a part of this expedition and then also be the crew on board for 25 years of continuous human presence, all kinds of milestones to celebrate.
Yeah, that's probably pretty exciting to go and meet your best friend in space. I think that's really cool that we are getting more crew in space, government and commercial crew in space, and maybe one day, that'll be the phone call you make, like, hey, I'll meet you in space.
And to that effect, too, just because of where they're docking today, again, that Zenith port, the space-facing port of the Harmony module, that was recently vacated just a couple of weeks ago from Axiom Mission 4, the 4th private astronaut to the International Space Station. So a lot of comings and goings and a lot of people on board station at any given point, but for them to come around and for the Dragon Endeavour celebrating its own milestones, its 6th flight and its return to the International Space Station again after 5 years ago to this day. It was the splashdown and return of Demo 2, and there's some great views that we're now getting. And this is from Dragon looking to the International Space Station, that sun shining bright, reflecting off of it and bouncing back towards the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft.
That is a view to see as your destination that you are making your way towards. As Dragon approaches the International Space Station, that view should get clearer and clearer, larger and larger right now. And there's a view inside of Dragon where we can see the commander and pilot of Crew-11. Again, this is an autonomous vehicle, so they really are just monitoring. You could see them utilizing those display screens there in front of them. And they're just monitoring all the operations that are happening on Dragon as they approach. This helps them stay aware. They do have to stay inside of their seats, so they can't look out the window very much. Very hard to see where Dragon actually is in comparison to the International Space Station. So those displays actually help them understand what's happening, where is Dragon, how close is it to the International Space Station, so that they can monitor and understand what's happening when they hear different sounds of the thrusters firing as Dragon is maneuvering its way towards the station.
And if necessary, there can be mid-course maneuvering after the approach initiation burn, which has already happened. And we just got note that there will be some more fine-tuning of the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft. And there you're seeing the over-the-shoulder shots as Mike Fink and Zina Cardman. Those are the 2 in the middle of the capsule. Platonov and Yui are on either side of them, but they're the ones talking over. And as you said, Jesse, monitoring what's soon to be in about a minute and a half to a minute or so of what's going to be that fine-tuning burn to make sure that Dragon is fine-tuning its path and on the right approach. You can see the great numbers down there at the bottom of your screen, too, of how close Dragon is getting to the International Space Station. And there's the space station from Dragon once again, as they are 13 hours and 30 minutes into today's flight. Their flight from liftoff, which was earlier this morning at 11:43 a.m. Eastern, 8:43 a.m. Pacific time. So it's been a event-filled day for this Crew-11 team. Had they lifted off on the first attempt yesterday, it would have been a lot longer of a phasing, about 39 hours or so, a chance to get settled in. And there's a great view from the International Space Station on the right side, looking down at Dragon. So they're inching their way slowly but surely as we continue to monitor the progress of the Dragon spacecraft. But again, we did catch word that there will be an out-of-plane burn, an adjustment burn to follow up so they continue that fine-tuning process and make their way to the International Space Station.
And some great views here on the left-hand side inside of Dragon with the crew. On your right-hand side, again, from the International Space Station, looking at Dragon as it approached. And in the bottom right-hand of your corner, you could see the graphic showing the thrusters on Dragon, which I think is really cool. It's a live graphic of every thruster that is thrusting, essentially. And I think it's so cool because, they're firing at different moments. There's a lot of tweaking that needs to happen. So there's several different thrusters firing at all different times to make sure that Dragon is oriented exactly the way that it needs to make its way as it approaches closer and closer to the International Space Station.
And Jesse, just to the right of that graphic you're seeing is those thrusters continuing to fire. And again, this is the maneuver, the mid-course burn that they're attempting and pushing Dragon to continue to properly align itself on the right trajectory to the International Space Station. But that's the International Docking Adapter that'll come into play a little bit later on. We've talked about the hooks needing to drive and hook to, after the soft capture, create the hard mate and bring Dragon even closer to the International Space Station before the leak checks can occur, the hatch opening, the pressurization, and so forth. So some great views on that screen. And again, as the spacecraft continuing to make its way closer and closer to the International Space Station, now about 1.5 kilometers away and closing in at a good rate as well of about 2 meters per second, as both Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station now covering over the southernmost portions of Africa.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, mid-course maneuver complete, performance nominal. Trajectory has converged on waypoint 0.
Dragon copies. Great news.
Great news indeed. That mid-course maneuver burn is complete. That was where we were seeing all those thrusters firing. Again, an adjustment needed as the vehicle approaches the International Space Station. There are very particular planned burns, and sometimes we add in additional potential burns that are only used if needed, and we did use this mid-course burn for this coasting phase for the Crew-11 crew. And you could see on your left-hand screen, well, there was a map of where Dragon and the International Space Station were located around the globe, but this is a great view from the International Space Station looking at Dragon. As you can see with Earth in the background, Dragon is still below the International Space Station. It'll soon move its way to waypoint 1, which will swing it up and above the International Space Station.
And those views,
really
again,
cool
coming
views.
from the orbiting laboratory, but and absolutely stellar. And that's the Cronus position inside of NASA's Johnson Space Center and Mission Control, providing these great views that allow us to follow along with Dragon's trajectory and procedures. But going back to a successful mid-course maneuver and helping out with that AI burn too, Jesse, that's just one of several opportunities where you can fine-tune and have those gates, those checkpoints, because now we're tracking what will be soon the next big milestone, reaching waypoint 0, that 400-meter mark, before Dragon will continue its approach, and they can hold at that waypoint 0. But if everything is aligned properly, sometimes we've seen the Dragon spacecraft continue to move forward. The crews on the ground both agree that everything looks great and we can continue to push forward, but just that's why we have those gates, to make sure that everything is properly aligned before we get any closer.
And also on the bottom left-hand of your screen, you could see a couple dials there. We have the range and the rate. The range is the distance from the International Space Station, and the rate is how quickly it's moving towards the International Space Station. So again, live range and rate there that you can follow along as Dragon makes its way to the International Space Station.
So 1.2 kilometers away is all that separates the two vehicles right now. And on the left-hand side, again, those over-the-shoulder shots of Mike Fink and Zena Cardman looking over those trajectory. And there's Dragon looking up at the International Space Station, and there's the space station looking down at Dragon Endeavour. Now, again, they're going to be performing all these different gates that we've been talking about. Waypoint 0 is the next one, where they're going to reach the 400-meter mark from there, waypoint 1 and waypoint 2. Now, part of that will also have them go up and over top of the International Space Station, because again, they're going to catch up to the space station from below, swing out in front, and then over to the zenith port or the space-facing side of the International Space Station to docking. So still quite a bit of movement left for the spacecraft to accomplish.
Again, as we've been mentioning, the crew is in their seats. The commander and pilot are both monitoring using those displays that are right in front of them. Again, just monitoring. Dragon is an autonomous vehicle, so essentially on autopilot as they make their way to station. And I love this view of the International Space Station. You know, you see pictures and sometimes models of the International Space Station, but when you get to see it live, like a live view like this, it is so cool to know that that is flying above the Earth at all times, and you get to see it a little bit up close. Even though we're down here on Earth, we get to see it live on these views.
Especially as we get closer, all the hardware up close from the solar arrays you can see fanned out on either side. As we now just got word that there's going to be a go, no-go poll for whether or not the Dragon spacecraft can proceed past waypoint 0 or if they need to hold at that given point. So that's where everything will continue to be monitored from the teams on the ground as well as the teams inside the International Space Station and the Dragon spacecraft. The big loop, you've heard it when they call up, they say Dragon on the big loop. That's what they mean, the communications that everyone is a part of, whether it's here in Hawthorne, in Houston, on the International Space Station, or inside Dragon Endeavour. They've also just crossed the 1,000-kilometer mark, or 1,000-meter mark, 1 kilometer, if you will, and that brings them into the approach ellipsoid. So that's how close we are, and those milestones we're starting to reach for the spacecraft. So now approaching about 920 meters away, and there's that rate of closure, that 4.9 meters per second for Dragon Endeavour, is Zena Cardman and Mike Fink continuing to look over their screens and see the trajectory. And you can see it a little bit on that middle screen there where the orb kind of on that top portion, that's where the International Space Station is. You can see some of those lines, those pathways being drawn. That's where the Dragon spacecraft is looking to maneuver. You can see it even swing up and over to the left and kind of